Good morning. I am Dr. Rick Fowler, and I have over 30 years of experience in the field of sports psychology, and I am now the current program coordinator for our 2 graduate programs in professional counseling with sports psychology at Truett McConnell University. In addition, I have authored, along with my 2 colleagues, this book called Counting the Cost: Raising and Coaching Elite Athletes. And in this book, we devote one whole chapter on the mental health challenges athletes face. So briefly, I'd like to comment on 2 questions. What are the common challenges facing neurodiverse athletes? And the second question is, what are the main challenges I see in coaching neurodiverse athletes? Okay, as a backdrop to these questions, I was a neurodiverse athlete myself. I was placed in special education throughout high school and told never to go to college. However, the only reason I went to college was to play basketball. But it wasn't until my junior year in college that a professor told me that it was my learning different style, not intelligence, that held me back. So how do ADHD athletes think? I can spend a whole day in a workshop on this, but here are a few common challenges ADHDers face that affect their sports performance. First one is ADHD people are normally locked into the right side of their brain. In other words, feeling kind of trumps facts. So cognitive recall is often difficult since memory is housed in the left side of the brain. For example, learning a play pattern in basketball, it was hard for me to figure out how I could perpetually remember that play because I was more of a feeler than a thinker. Another one is interesting study on free throws in basketball. You wonder why athletes have sometimes with ADHD have problems shooting free throws, because that's a left brain activity, but they can be very spontaneous and be able to do other facts that are great on the basketball floor. And I think that's one of the reasons why in the last 10 years or so, basketball coaches have gone more to run and gun than specific plays that you play over and over and over till you get the shot, is because of the intuition that a player can have who has ADHD. Second is, we as ADHDers get distracted easily, and sometimes it's hard to stay focused. ADHD people tend to be loop thinkers rather than linear thinkers. Now that means as we are thinking about something, we will process that, and then we have to come back to the linear line and go from there, and then we can pick up what we need to do to win. So, for example, in school, a teacher might say to a student, here's some things that you need to understand to pass the course. So they're processing it, but by the time it comes back to the linear line, the teacher's probably 2 steps ahead, and that's why a lot of ADHDers have problem in school, because they're more loop thinkers than linear thinkers. Also, we tend to be hyperactive and restless at times, and this can lead to team dynamics or lead to penalty in sports, especially intense situations on the ball field. Also, at times we struggle with punctuality. A lot of my players, when I was coaching basketball with ADHD, were late to practice or forgetting equipment and things of that nature. So we have to work with these athletes in this area. Positive trait, however, is we tend to be very intuitive, and we can sense what will work. I remember one of my clients years ago was an NFL All-Pro quarterback. He told me, he said, my coaches never did like me. And I said, why? He said, because I would change the plays at the line of scrimmage, because my intuitive sense said do this instead of that, and it worked, but the coach got mad because I didn't do what they wanted to do. So a lot of times, to get away from the structure, we deal more with the intuitive part, which is probably in a lot of ways.
I just need my kiss.
And lastly, we tend to be very intuitive, and we can sense what's working. I remember several years ago, I was consulting and counseling a NFL quarterback who was an all-pro quarterback, and he was telling me, he said, well, my coaches sometimes don't like what I call on the field. And I said, why? He says, because they tell me to run one play, and I get up there and I see what's happening, and I can intuitively know if I do this, this will work, but this won't work, and I'll change the play in the line of scrimmage. So one of the positives is that we can then see the game in a different light than people who are totally left brain, which sees everything in a very specific way. The second part of the question was, what tips do I give coaches on how to instruct their athletes who are neurodiverse? The first one is, I tell coaches, don't assume that your neurodiverse athletes actually understand your directions the first time you teach those strategies to them. You might say, do you understand what I'm saying? A lot of coaches, because they respect you, will say, yeah, I understand, but they really don't. And with neurodiverse people, sometimes you have to repeat what you're going to say several times and then say, well, then demonstrate that for me before you really know that they understand what's going on. The second thing is being more right brain dominated. Neurodiverse athletes need more encouragement. And my suggestion is this: for every 2 pluses that you give an athlete, you should have only 1 negative. So you give more pluses than minuses. And this will help the confidence level of people who are more right brain dominated. Third, social media addiction and ADHD compromise the same diagnostic symptoms. This is unreal statistics and research lately that shows that because people are so tied into addicted to their social media, that they exhibit the same characteristics of ADHD people. And so almost every team now has close to about half of its members possessing some neurodiverse symptoms. For example, one of the interesting things I've heard was that one NFL coach, to accommodate this phenomena, has to give his players a phone break every 45 minutes so that they get ticked off. Here they are making millions of dollars, but they say, Coach, we need this, we need this. Because their addiction to that and ADHD is staying focused and dominant with the left brain is not there anymore, and they feel the need to do that. Number 4 is coaches, bring your team into your team individuals trained in sports psychology, counseling. For example, the University of Georgia football team, I think they have 5 counselors that work strictly with athletes on the mental aspects of the game. Don't feel you're competing with them. Don't feel they're asserting your authority. With our culture today, this is the element that you need in order to win games. And finally, coaches need to educate themselves on neurodiverse approaches to coaching. Today, if coaches want to be successful, they need to understand what ADHD is and how to develop new strategies to fit this upcoming culture. So I hope these few tips help you, and as you work with these people who have ADHD and other neurodiverse symptoms, and that you educate yourself to get more into it so that your teams can be more successful.